Good evening. My name is Sally Cram. I am the VP of Programming and the Director of the Film Festival, and I have the great misfortune to tell you that our embassy contact did not show up tonight. I don't exactly know why, and hopefully I can perhaps send some emails tomorrow and make sure that they are here next week. But in the meantime, I look forward to hearing your comments. And anyone out in streaming world, if you want to send in your questions, please feel free to do so at 202-841-4226. Send it by text. And what we're going to do now is have a facilitated conversation. My lovely assistant, Neil Cram, will be walking around the microphone while I stand here for virtual world. And I am going to admit that while I am not the film expert that we have generally had for our talkbacks, I will say that I've seen a lot of Israeli films at this stage in my career. And I will note this is the first one that we've ever, well, before we get to that, I know the sound was difficult. And one of the challenges this year is the first year we ran the film off of a download, and whether that had any relationship or not to the sound quality, I can't speak. I will also note that Tikvat Israel is in the midst of changing its sound system in the sanctuary, and whether that had an effect on the sound quality, I don't know. But we are hoping to have it cleared up for next week when we have a comedy where it's really important that you hear the dialogue. Whereas this week, as you may have noticed, it was much more of an action-heavy film.
I think next week's has subtitles.
Next week has subtitles. You will note that most of the dialogue in this movie took place in heavily accented English, which is a first for us. We had previously always tried to select films that were predominantly Hebrew. This year, for those who don't know, we had a bigger challenge selecting films than I've ever had before. I went to some of our usual distributors and they said to me, well, what do you want? And I said, I want, dramatic films, not dramas, but, fictional films that don't have sex or nudity. And they said to me, we can give you documentaries. Sorry, for those who don't know, I'm trying to be very careful. So I'm going to stand over here, but I'm going to talk without the mask on.
Yes, people were complaining about the sound quality coming from your mouth.
People were complaining about the sound quality of the reception. So we reached out to our distributors and they said, well, you don't want sex or nudity, we can give you documentaries. So I tried out some documentaries on our film selection crew, which is a group of other congregants who've been giving me their opinions about films for years. And their answer was, we'll take the one film you have that's a drama, Plan A. And then we went to our backup distributor, Menemsha Films. And they actually, Kiss Me Kosher, which is next week's film, was a backup to a backup. And I can tell you more about that story later. But it seems that our congregation really does want to talk about dramatic films. They want to see stories. They don't want to, in this setting, see, frankly, documentaries. So I'm told that in 2020 and 2021, which were the years that we looked at for selecting our films, very few dramatic films got made in Israel, and I suppose those that were made had sex and nudity. So, lean pickings, and this is what we had. I'd welcome thoughts from anyone who had a comment, and I'll do my best to see if I can answer
Thank you for being first, letting me be first. I liked the film a lot. I think it really kept my attention. I think it was a good selection. It left me with a lot of questions. What was in the black bag?
That's a very good question. Anybody want to give their supposition about what was in the black bag? Hold on. Neil, could you give her the microphone? She has a theory.
In my opinion, death was in the bag. He told him he captured death. The old man told him he captured death, and it was in the bag. He opened the bag, and the guy with the poison walked in. So death walked in, and then they proceeded to kill all those people. Wait, I know, but could death be in the bag? I mean, let's face it. But that's what happened when he opened the bag. The guy carrying the poison walked in, and the guy with the poison was carrying death. So death walked in.
Okay, death was in the bag. Any opposing position? Maxine? Neil? Is anyone else interested in being a second microphone walker for us? Thank you.
I think it was a warning that death is emptiness, and when he had that dream, he realized that he needed to go on, and that it was basically he was going to make a choice, and he chose to excuse me, go to Israel and live and continue with his life, and living was his best revenge to the Nazis. And I think the guy who gave him the bag was holding on to hope, and that's why he didn't want to let go or open that bag of death, you know?
I actually want to take a survey. Who thinks that revenge killing is ever justified? Ever. All right. What about what's the word I want? The plot in this movie where the revenge killing was against people unknown to the proponent. Okay, hold on, Jonathan.
Hello. Oh, I guess it's working. I had no problem with the list. Give me a list. Tell me this guy did this guy did this guy did this. Kill him. Fine. I didn't have any problem with that. I would have had a problem with killing kids and people I didn't know or that were not directly complicit. That's a little gray. And kids, no. But the list, when they went around killing people with a gun, and they said, oh, this guy's on the list, he probably was working in one of the camps, sure.
Any other opinion?
First of all,
I really like the.
I must say,
I like the Haganah guy who tried to convince them that by going to Israel and building a country of Jewish people, this is the best revenge. And but I guess he couldn't לשכנע אותם, convince him that that's the best way. But and about the bag, I felt that he got instruction actually to open it in Israel. Only when you get to Palestine you open it. And I thought it would be full of his imagination, to fulfill his imagination. You're right, he opened it, and he did want revenge in a different way, and it came up as his imagination of killing. He wanted to kill. But I guess at the end he was convinced that the best nekama is the revenge is to go to Israel.
We have a response back here. Thank you, lovely assistant.
Hi. First of all,
Speak in the mic, please.
I'd like to say that, or I need to say, that I am a pacifist. So there are many different ways to get revenge.
Could you speak up? It's a little hard to hear in the front of the room.
There are many different ways to get revenge. And certainly, I find it hard sitting here thinking that anyone in this room could actually kill another human being. And the way we get revenge is we return. And I ran a tour group for about 13 years with a Jewish historian. And we returned. And we stood in the squares where they burned the Jews. And we circled around. And we sang. And we said prayers. And we would gather hundreds of people that wanted to know what we were doing there and what we were singing and what did the words mean and what were the prayers about. And that was our way of getting revenge. We are here, we are flourishing, and we will continue. That's the kind of revenge that we should all be doing.
Felicia and then Steve.
When Dan and I went to Israel how many years ago, probably 10 years ago, one of the things that struck me that I learned there was that Israelis have a ambivalent, I don't know if it's ambivalent is the right word, feeling toward people who survived the Holocaust, because Israel is built on the back of people fighting, and this came up in the film when the guy in the Jewish brigade asked I forget his name, asked the young man, why didn't you fight? You let them walk away with your wife and your child, and you didn't fight, and you could see the disdain. And I sensed that when I was in Israel. Maybe Ziva could speak to that because she's from Israel. But I sensed this attitude.
Hold on. So Ziva has said that people don't talk about their survival of the Holocaust because of the perception that they were weak and they let the Holocaust happen to them. But she also noted that you can't judge people because where they were was individual to each person.
Getting back to the question of revenge, I think you had a dichotomy here of revenge versus justice. and revenge versus justice. The list was the justice. They made it sound like it was even a court, okay? And that was the Haganah, and that was the British Jewish Brigade, which was filled with Haganah, etc., as opposed to the Avengers, who were totally into the revenge mode. The revenge, and I totally agree, is being able to stand here and say, look, we're still here. That's the ultimate revenge. And I remember when I went on a tour of Eastern Europe and we were in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and my son, who was home, said, Dad, how could you go there and spend money in Germany? And I said, because I can. Because I could stand there and say, you didn't win.
Cliff and then Carol.
While we're talking about revenge, and of course now we're seeing post-World War II in the scene and the time of the movie. If you think, though, I think in human history, I can't think of any other example better than Germany, especially West Germany, in admitting, acknowledging, and trying to atone in every way a country can for what the Nazis perpetrated during their period. And so when we think about revenge, and I think many of us were torn. Yes, it's wrong to have revenge, but we could certainly sympathize with that group and almost rooting for them in a sense to accomplish it, even though we could figure out it probably wouldn't. When we think about what Germany is today and what Germany has done today and throughout since World War II, something we have to keep in mind, so that they have done probably more than any other civilization has or any other country has in the world, in the history of the world, to atone, to admit, to acknowledge their own guilt, and to try to make amends for it. I think the Catholic Church has done a pretty good job in the last couple of decades, likewise, of doing what it did to set the scene for the Holocaust to occur. Certainly the Catholic Church has lots more to atone for more recently. But let's keep in mind what the current German government for the last, well, since World War II really, has done to acknowledge and to atone in viewing even this historical episode as is portrayed in the movie.
All right, a comment in response to something Cliff just said and then something I wanted to say, which is I think in Germany today there actually is starting to bubble up a rise in ultra right-wing, including anti-Semitism. But the point I wanted to make was, there's only one Germany now. Okay. The point I wanted to make was there were lots of things in this movie that disturbed me, but frankly I think the most chilling thing for me is when that farmer comes out, hits the guy with a rifle and says, just because the war is over doesn't mean we can't kill Jews.
Can you hear me? Good. I'm probably the only one in the room here who was in the military during the Vietnam War and was sent to effectively, I was sent after a while to be in Germany. I didn't want to be out there shooting at Vietnamese because I think we were on the wrong side in that war. And I didn't, it was very hard for me to say, why should I go out and kill these people who are trying to get rid of the French, who are our allies? I had no hate for one way or the other for the Vietnamese, but I sure as hell would rather be there if I was shooting at somebody. I'd rather be a German, because it was in my mind. And I got sidebarred one day by an American officer who I gathered it was sent to me by, I would be told by a Jewish officer.
Could you speak up just a little bit, please?
I was told by this Jewish, I guess he was a captain, he said, you can't go using your Class A to clothes in Heidelberg, which was the nearby city. And I thought to myself, if I'm aggravating them, too bad. But of course, I had to do what I was being ordered not to do. But it bothered me because I was there. There were times when I thought to myself, the hatred doesn't go away. I didn't lose anybody in my family directly in World War II to the Germans, and our families had come over from Europe before even the First World War. So it's just something that these people did that, followed orders, and that was just wrong. And right now, we're seeing that the wrong thing is going on in Europe right now. Finally, they're bailing out the people that are being bombed by the Russians for no reason, as far as I'm concerned. It's going on anyway. And I am glad that Chinese have decided not to enter this thing, because they realize the Americans probably will retaliate sooner or later.
Thank you. I thought it was particularly interesting that much of the film was shot in Lviv, Ukraine, obviously before the war. So to your point, we're creating a whole new generation, I suppose, of people seeking vengeance in Ukraine against Russia. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, but I want to make sure that everyone else who wanted to make a comment has an opportunity to, and then we'll come back to you. Sam?
Actually, I was stationed in Germany during the Vietnam War, and I was in charge of community relations with the German community for our post. It was a strange situation.
Best job ever.
Best job ever. I'll tell you, compared to Vietnam, it was the best job. So I dealt with a lot of Germans, Germans who worked on post, Germans in the German community in Göppingen. Actually, I helped set up the first equal housing opportunity program for the Army in Germany, because at that time, the Germans, they didn't have any Jews to bar. They were not renting apartments to black American soldiers. And so my job was to get them to start renting to black American soldiers, which we were a little successful. Dealing with a lot of Germans for that year, there is no single German. There's a lot of different Germans. Some are contrite and, as Cliff said, were very willing to accept their guilt. There were others who just hid their feelings about Jews and the war. And the thing that was most revealing was they were scared of hell about Israel, because they knew Israel had the atomic bomb, and they were afraid the Israelis were going to use the bomb against the Germans. And so they were very friendly, trying to be very friendly with Israel because of that. But there was, because of this difference, there were some that were very open to the Americans. And I'm not sure if I ever wore Class A's or fatigues when I was in the German community, but I probably was several times. So they knew I was an American soldier. I mean, I spoke English. I mean, there wasn't any secret about it. But there was a lot of resentment about the Americans. We were opposed to it near in this town, Göppingen, outside of Stuttgart. And American soldiers, when they're in town, they're drinking and making trouble, and so a lot of the local Germans really didn't like the Americans, but they liked the black Americans less. So I think in terms of national guilt or national remorse, there is no national guilt. There is no national remorse. There's individuals and a lot of bad people, and we met some good ones too. But they never stopped their underlying feeling about the Jews. It was always there.
Thank you. Jonathan.
So, sorry. One of the people that I found very interesting in the film was Anna, because she was obviously severely traumatized and totally involved in the plan, and then at the end she just gets up and leaves and she can't go through with it. So I don't know that I have a comment about, a question about that, but I just found that interesting.
Jonathan, do you find her reaction authentic or overly cinematic?
It didn't quite make sense logically, but I don't think she was in a logical frame of mind. So I think in an unreal sort of a way, in an unreal situation, because the Holocaust was very unreal in the sense of it just didn't make sense, which is why nobody bombed the concentration camps, because they couldn't, part of the reason they didn't think they could really be happening. So I think in the same vein, I think that her response was logically illogical.
Thank you.
I had a different view of her. She wanted revenge for the killing of her son. And two things that happened to her in the movie kind of gave her time to re-reflect the end result of just revenge. That scene in the movies where they had just living lust. It was almost doing something, being alive again, instead of being dead inside. And then when her flashlight went out in the tunnel, and she didn't know what would happen. And I think at that point she thought, I want to live. You know, that she could have been just dead inside and only wanted revenge for her son. But those two different incidents kind of reframed for her the opportunity of going on. You hear about so many survivors who remarry, have families, and recreate a new life for themselves. And I think maybe that's what happened to her, that basically a resurrection, if you will.
Here and then back there.
Talk loudly into it. All right. I saw that coming because when she was walking down the street and she was watching those children drink the water, I saw that coming. But I don't know if you got the idea that the Nazis didn't kill her kid. Her kid drowned in a tunnel because she couldn't keep him afloat anymore and he was not a strong child. She wanted revenge. But I think losing her child and knowing how she lost her child and not wanting anybody else to suffer like that, I think that basically turned her around. I think she could have gone ahead if she'd known she'd be killing men and women, but as soon as she got to the point where she realized all these kids on the street would be dead, that's what changed her mind.
Thank you.
That was pretty much the same point I was going to make, and I believe she said as she was leaving, she was thinking of the children. She couldn't go through with the plan because she knew children would be killed.
So here's another question. Raise your hand. Did you like the film? Did you dislike the film? Interesting. The one comment I got before we showed it tonight was, it's a despicable film, and why did you pick it? Yes. And yeah. And I will say once again, we had slim pickings, but we've never really shown an action film before. This is a new genre for us. And I will also note that it was in English, despite the fact that people may not have been able to hear the English. It was an English-speaking film, and as you may recall from our previous talkbacks, the Israeli film industry is seeking an audience, and they understand that a big part of their audience might be American Jews. And they create films for the film festival circuit, if you will, which plays to a predominantly non-Hebrew speaking world, and hence, this is the first time we've had a film that frankly had very little Hebrew in it at all.
I'll say something.
Okay.
So a couple things. I thought that the main character Max looked like a cross between Mark Hamill and Christopher Walken. Anybody else see that?
Very insightful
Thank
comment.
you.
Thank you.
So I also noticed, being a lefty, that the first time when he was drawing his wife and son, he was drawing left-handed. I was like, oh wow, he's a lefty. And then every other time throughout the film, when he wrote or drew, he used his right hand. And I don't know if he's, ambidextrous and wanted to make sure he wasn't writing, left-handed in front of the Germans, or if they just happened to, flip the film around for the first scene. Yeah, by accident.
Wait. Hold on just a minute. We have Felicia, and then we'll come back to you.
I feel like, excuse me, I feel like some of the previous Israeli films we've watched, there's sort of a trick at the end. There's a lot of times where it's unresolved, and the Israelis seem to love that mechanism of leaving it up in the air as to what the ending is.
That would be called European films.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, one thing I liked about this film was that that I didn't find out until afterward, but that we thought he was actually carrying out the poisoning, and we didn't know that it was a dream sequence. But then they showed us cinematically, and therefore at a gut level, what that really looked like, what revenge really looked like. And when as much as at times, as some have said, we were rooting in a way for the revenge to be carried out, when we actually saw it, this is what it looks like, and it really felt horrible. It's just that's how it affected me.
All right, we're going to go here, and then we're going to go to Sam.
I just want to say a weird thing about the sound. I think somebody else said to me that when they showed the newsreel in the movie theater, the sound was clear as a bell. I could understand every word, and yet the rest of the film was somewhat garbled. Anybody else have that experience that you could hear every bit of the newsreel when they described what was going on? I wonder why that was. That's a technical question for the technical department. You didn't notice it, though. It was weird.
So I think that's interesting. One of the things I often wonder about is whether the Israeli films, in my opinion, are up to American standards in script and acting, even cinematography, but on certain areas I think that they are well behind American films, special effects, for example, and perhaps sound, out of curiosity. Sam.
So if we couldn't hear the film, we don't know if we liked it or not. Maybe we heard a different movie. I don't. Yeah.
It was actually a musical.
Yeah. It was Fred Astaire, and so we don't know. We don't know. We think we do. Maybe we do. I just, not to bore you more with stories of the Army, a telling story which I forgot to mention. So we were there for Purim in Germany, and we were to go to the synagogue in Stuttgart, which was having a Purim party. We were invited to Stuttgart for the Purim party at the synagogue, beautiful synagogue in downtown Stuttgart. And before we got there, we were told they've moved the venue because there were threats against the synagogue when they heard there was supposed to be a party there, and there was threats against the synagogue, so they moved it away from the synagogue to a private party room rather than the synagogue. This was 1970. So that's not new, the rise of anti-Semitism and right wing in Germany. In 1970, it was there, and so.
I was just, I was just curious from a technical point of view. The scenes, the bombed out scenes of the city, I know it was done in Lviv, and that was before the current war has broken out. And was this done on a film set? Or, I mean, it was very realistic. It was really well done. I mean, it looked very real to me.
I want to follow up on Sam's point because I was thinking about time. So here's my question. This movie was made somewhere around 2020? Okay. So we're talking 75 years after the end of World War II. And my question for all of us to think about is, will films about the Holocaust still be made 100 years? 150 years?
So Carol, I think about that in this way. When, well, Neil and I haven't gone to a lot of bar mitzvahs lately, but when we were in the height of bar mitzvah season, we would hear Motown at the bar mitzvahs. And of course, they played Motown at my bat mitzvah. But we don't hear Harry Mancini or Ferenti and Teicher, which is, or even Frank Sinatra to the extent, which was the music they played at my parents' generation of bar mitzvahs. So will the Holocaust continue to be the subject of film? It is among the most traumatic events in human history. I'd be hard-pressed to believe it won't be, but I also think that as we've gotten further away from World War II, the number of World War II films we've seen has declined pretty precipitously.
I would like to make another comment. People from the generation before our generation, my generation, fought in World War II. Two uncles of mine, but my aunt actually stayed on when they were emptying out the people lined up to be killed. And the Germans still had a presence at these at these places, prisons. And they were saying, oh, I just work here. I was a low-level thing. But my aunt spoke fluent Yiddish and listened to what the people in the inside fence were saying as to who these people were. And she had all these people arrested, and they didn't really realize that the red-headed American girl spoke fluent Yiddish. And therefore, a lot of the people got the right thing. That is to say, they identified the right people as who were the German officers that were killing Jews. She disappeared off the screen for 2 years. She ended up going to what was then Palestine and shepherded a lot of the people from the ships coming in when the British were not letting them land. but they landed there, and we put them in a prison, which we visited in Israel when we were there. And when they were going to free them all, they were given an order. You can't kill any British or American soldiers, but you can knock them out. And they planned, the people in Haifa had said, we don't like those Jews, we don't want them. And yet they were the ones that hid all of these Jews getting freed. And that's why the revolution for Israel becoming independent actually was formed in the north when they didn't expect any help from those Jews, and the British just had to give up because they were all except for big pockets of Jews coming immediately down to Jerusalem, and it didn't happen, or Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Harold. Very interesting. Looks like we're wrapping up. Were there any last comments or thoughts?
So I thought the guy who was Abba, I thought he looked a little like Jonathan Silverman.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
who as you know, was in a movie that revolved entirely around a dead guy.
Okay. Thank you. Join us next week, 7:45. We'll be on a considerably lighter time. And thank you for coming.